Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Conducive webinar. My name is Nick Tidd. I will be your moderator and host today. Joining me are my esteemed colleagues, Robert Woolery. Robert is our Senior Vice President of Product Management and Marketing, and Howard Butler, who is our Senior Director of Systems Engineering and Field Support. Today we're very excited to share with you our Velocity product portfolio, but if I could, some housekeeping items. As one of the moderators today, we also have a number of folks who are monitoring the chat boxes, and if for any reason that we've had an issue getting some pizza out to you, please drop a note either in the chat box or the Q&A box, the chat box preferably, and we will make sure that we get that looked after for you. You'll also notice throughout the presentation this is going to be a fairly interactive session. So please, as we go through, feel free to put questions in the Q&A box. I, of course, being the moderator, reserve the right to answer the question at the appropriate time. That's our legal binding commercial. But I will stop the guys and have them post a question. We have scheduled 30 minutes for the webinar, but if this is any indication like our previous ones, we do anticipate we'll go longer with our informal comments. We'll get through the formal part of the presentation, and we'll be more than happy to stay online and take as many questions as we possibly can. And if, in fact, we do not get to any of those questions, we'll follow up with an email to you. So with that, why don't we get started, Howard? As I mentioned at the onset of the call, we're here today to share with you the Velocity portfolio, specifically the Velocity Virtual Machine Acceleration software part of our portfolio, which is the first in a series of products from Conducive focused on I/O optimization without the need for additional hardware. You are going to hear us refer to that over and over and over again because we want to take you to a different mindset in the way in which to view the technology. But before we get into Velocity VM, it might be helpful to know who Conducive is and what we do. Conducive is a company with a proven track record of delivering innovative and robust software for enterprises, government, and what a lot of people don't realize is our work with leading system and storage OEMs like SanDisk, Lenovo, Samsung, LG, Fujitsu, Acer, ASUS, and HP, and also Western Digital. We are known globally as caching experts, and caching really is one of the pillars of what we're going to describe to you today. Globally as a caching expert and with our OEM partners leveraging that caching expertise and licensing versions of our caching technology to improve the performance of their product offerings. So really a core understanding and a DNA of working with those partners. Today we have well in excess of 44 million licenses sold, and in fact almost 90% of the Fortune 500 have our products installed, whether it's domestically here in the United States or around the world. We also continue to build upon our deep relationships with Microsoft and VMware. Specifically with VMware, we're a TAP and Flash program partner. And with Microsoft, a very close working relationship with them on the architecture and really part of the heritage of the organization. Moreover, for those that are interested and have offices outside the U.S., we have a global footprint, and so we're able to assist customers throughout the world. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a backdrop about Conducive and who we are. And now I'd like to turn it over to Robert to really set the framework for you on the architecture.
Terrific. Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're enjoying lunch. So as many of you are experiencing, there is a data explosion underway. IDC is forecasting over the next 10 years that the number of files will grow by 75 times. Now, along with that data explosion is an I/O explosion, as applications create that information and a growing number of devices want to access those files. A leading Gartner analyst at a recent conference noted that I/O will grow by 25x over the next 2 years alone. Now the challenge is hardware can't keep up with this data or the I/O explosion cost effectively. Over the next 10 years, hardware performance is expected to increase by 4 to 8 times, and even if you double that, it's clear that hardware can't keep up. So while the cost of hardware on a per unit basis may go down or a price performance basis may go down, investments are going up as organizations keep adding hardware to solve the I/O explosion and the bottlenecks that it creates. This I/O explosion has created performance bottlenecks in part because of server virtualization. So don't get us wrong, server virtualization is great technology, but there's some challenges with it. So for example, this is because physical servers running multiple virtual machines must often carry out far more I/O operations than a single server running a single workload. And typically, virtualized environments emulate I/O devices which run less efficient than the actual native I/O device itself. So in essence, virtualization acts like a funnel, combining and mixing many disparate I/O streams, sending them out to disk in what becomes a very random I/O pattern, a blender effect, so to speak. To make matters worse, the more the VMs are added, the more the issue is compounded as more I/O is randomized. All of this has a very negative effect on storage performance and renders time-honored techniques such as read-ahead buffers and caching algorithms far less effective than in the conventional physical environments. So storage I/O is the most critical issue in a virtualized environment and can cause organizations to spend a great deal on storage, purchasing more and more disk drives and striping across them to overcome these performance bottlenecks. Now, the outcome is that due to the issue related to performance bottlenecks in a virtual environment, organizations have to keep adding storage hardware to solve this performance problem. This dependency on storage hardware to alleviate the I/O bottleneck is a very expensive dependency and doesn't allow an organization to realize the full promise of their virtualized investment because the money that is being saved on server hardware is now being spent on storage hardware. So at Conducive, we created a line of products called Velocity. As Nick said earlier, we're going to discuss Velocity VM, or Velocity for virtual machines. And Velocity VM increases performance by 50% without any additional storage hardware. You can think of it as a software approach to performance, a non-intrusive way to increase performance. Velocity VM is a virtual machine acceleration software, and it increases performance by 50% without any additional hardware. And what's unique is it's optimizing read and write I/O at the source, which is the operating system itself. So by being that close to the application, it allows you to reduce unnecessary I/O and eliminate application bottlenecks right at the source. So the application and everything in the ecosystem can receive the benefits of I/O performance. So the bottom line is Velocity VM reduces the amount of I/O you have to deal with.
Thanks, Robert. So just a reminder to folks, we're going to make this fairly interactive, so please feel free to fire some questions in the Q&A box, and I'll stop the guys as we go through the presentation. So now we're going to kind of get into some of the performance barriers.
Thank you, Nick. So you can think of the two primary performance barriers in two different buckets. One is unnecessary write I/Os, and the other one is unnecessary read I/Os. The first bucket, unnecessary write I/Os, is caused by the Windows operating system breaking a file into several pieces upon write. Now the challenge is each piece requires an additional operation at the storage layer. In essence, you can think of this as a write penalty because you're taking a perfectly good file and breaking it up into pieces, so that every single one of those pieces creates a write, and obviously it also creates an activity when you have to read back all those particular pieces. Now the second performance barrier is created when the same file gets read again and again. With each read, that data must travel the full distance between the server and storage, increasing latency and stealing storage bandwidth each time it makes that round trip. So when you look under the hood at the Velocity VM product, there are several pieces of key technology in there. We like to call them engines. But we're going to focus on two key engines for this discussion. So the first technology engine is a write I/O optimization engine called IntelliWhite. Now what IntelliWhite does, it eliminates unnecessary I/O caused by the operating system breaking files apart. So IntelliWhite understands when a file is broken apart, and it brings the pieces back together into one I/O and pre-allocates the file so it is written sequentially to disk, optimizing write performance, and then obviously read performance when you read that file back. So Velocity VM I/O optimization is specifically tailored for these virtual environments and the storage that is attached to them. So, for example, things like network storage, whether it's SAN or NAS, can receive the benefit of this particular approach because it proactively delivers I/O benefits without creating any sort of negative impact on your advanced storage systems, or storage features, like thin provisioning, snapshot, data deduplication, replication, or thin provisioning in particular. So Velocity is designed not only to work with any storage system and improve its performance, but also optimize the performance of your advanced storage features.
So can I pause you guys, because I'm going to ask you a specific question from Nathan Hammer. So that's probably for Howard. So let's get laser focus on a specific vendor. How does this play with SANs, such as Compellent? Compellent SANs move data between different speed disks to keep data used more often on faster drives and data used less often on slower drives.
So the technology in Velocity is providing an improved I/O traffic stream that Compellent can take advantage of. Their tiered storage type technology that you spoke of will continue to work exactly the way it's currently working for you. It's just that they will receive more optimized type of I/O requests and fewer I/Os because of our caching.
So folks are going to hear us say this later on with a picture, because as being the sales guy, picture's worth 1,000 words. Really the message is, to reinforce what Robert said, is we're agnostic to the storage vendor, not changing any function and feature, in fact performing that performance regardless of what storage vendor you've chosen.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
So Nathan, I'd like to add one thing to that. In that storage array, as they tier data to improve its performance, remember, we're very complementary to what they're doing there. One of the fundamental features within this IntelliWhite technology is we're removing unnecessary I/O. Think of it as a I/O reduction technology. And the I/O that is being sent to that storage system is now highly productive I/O because we've put more data into that I/O. Think of it as having more kilobytes per I/O. Now when that storage system from Compellent gets that I/O, it now can focus on productive I/O only, doesn't have to worry about unnecessary I/O, and that productive I/O is coming in a very dense fashion, so that system, that Compellent system, now can work its magic on how to best optimize laying that data out for a write and how to bring that data up for a read.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys one more. Keep them shorter because we've got a lot of slides to go.
Yep.
All right, so Amin asked, will this work with hybrid SAN SSD flash?
Absolutely, it'll work just fine with that.
Okay, let's go, because I'm going to ask you guys a couple of other questions in a minute.
All right. So IntelliMemory technology is the other technology engine that we have, and it reduces I/O bottlenecks by intelligently caching frequently used data on the application based on that application itself, its usage and time. You can think of it as server-side caching. Velocity VM is a self-learning, intelligent caching system, and Howard will get into more details, but you need to think about it as a behavior analytics engine. So it caches data ahead of time, greatly improving performance, eliminating unnecessary I/O traffic by reading the same data again and again, and allowing you to improve performance by up to 50%. So while our caching technology is new in Velocity VM, it's been used by our OEM partners and in their products around the globe for several years now. This technology has been real-world tested across a large number of systems, providing proven and robust software technology.
So I'm going to pause you because we get this one out of the way. So Ronald Kirk is asking, is there a file size limitation?
No, there is no file size limitation.
Perfect. Okay. And there's a whole bunch more coming, so I'm going to ask those. Just pause because I'll poke you in the right place with the right question. Let's go.
And I'll turn, Howard, why don't you take the next couple of slides, take them into some detail.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Robert. Nick, I appreciate all the questions there. Keep them rolling in. So the optimization that Robert has spoken about is based on performance gains is truly possible because of that new approach that IntelliWhite takes. This is a technology innovation and really a completely different way of thinking. The system monitoring technology, or the analytical engine that Robert carefully talked about just for a second there, sits inside of the Velocity virtual machine and provides the intelligent data about which files would be low performing, resulting in those split IOs. Now, IntelliWhite can use that data to accurately and dynamically adjust how to allocate space for file writes to eliminate the vast majority of those split IOs, without causing the free space to become divided into small segments. Keep in mind that no resources are spent trying to optimize every file. We just really need to focus on the ones which will get the most benefit. Now, file movement is kept to an absolute minimum and only on the files in which users and applications typically are accessing frequently. Therefore, this eliminates any compatibility issues with advanced storage features such as snapshots, thin provisioning, data deduplication or replication, SSDs, and even tiered storage. In fact, we enhance these advanced storage features by eliminating all the extra and unnecessary I/O traffic that Windows typically generates, so they can focus on how to best handle the I/O traffic that they do receive. So let me take a moment here and talk a little bit about IntelliMemory. This technology breakthrough of IntelliMemory is in its use of the behavior analytics, which removes unnecessary read IOs and makes efficient use of a RAM cache for satisfying those read IO requests. And this can dramatically speed up your IOs per second. Through the use of an internal system monitoring technology, IntelliMemory is aware of what files and IO traffic patterns that make up the bulk of the IO requests, and dynamically allocates a portion of unused virtual memory. Now, depending on your platform configuration, it can use between 256 megabytes all the way up to as much as 24 gigabytes for its read cache. Now, this cache, again, is dynamic, meaning that if there is ever a need for more system memory, IntelliMemory can quickly return that memory back to the pool before the system actually needs it. So there's never a case where there's going to be a memory starvation type of situation simply due to our caching technology.
Okay, so let's get, because this is where we get bombarded with all the techie questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Bring it on.
And those are asking for, a few folks have asked me, so what OSs are you compatible with and where do I sit? Trust me, my favorite slide's 3 away and I'll answer all those questions. But let's get into some of the technical ones. So this question is coming from Craig Yamoto. What does this do to network packet size? Are we looking at more 9K packet MTUs?
Well, you're going to be looking at the fact that Windows is going to be packing more data in a single I/O request. So how that gets farmed out across your network will be more efficient with larger I/O requests.
Okay, so let me kind of take you to the next step on that question, because Antonio is saying, sounds like you are just making big packets. How does this affect the network? Do you want to dispel that for him?
It's not just big packets. It's really optimizing the behavior of Windows and how the NTFS file system is passing the I/O request and the number of I/O requests being done more efficiently. So as far as the network is concerned, you're going to have fewer I/O requests or fewer packets traveling across the network as a result of more data being packed in there.
You bet. I think one of the things, a point of clarification is that when we talked about the IntelliWhite technology, I think it's important to understand that it's removing unnecessary I/O so that your network doesn't have to deal with that. So the I/O that is sent, is Howard said, is far more efficient. So you're not only having efficient I/O being sent, but a lot less of it being sent across your network.
Perfect. So straight segue. So Larry's saying, so does file encryption affect performance? Robert, what's your favorite saying?
An I/O is an I/O is an I/O. It does not. So once that I/O gets into the encryption technology or encryption engines, then those engines take over, obviously working their magic. But what they're being provided is a lot less unnecessary I/O, and that the packets are highly efficient because they are are full of data.
Okay, and let's just go back to, because you guys didn't answer this one yet. So does the Velocity software weigh the CPU? If so, what is the average?
Well, with regards to CPU overhead, it's really hard for you to even be able to measure the amount of CPU usage attributed to Velocity. The mini file filter drivers are very tightly written, using only a couple of hundred kilobytes in size. And the Velocity service is just using a matter of a few seconds in a 24-hour period. So there really isn't any measurable overhead associated to what we're doing, especially when you compare that with how much wasted effort is being spent by Windows processing all those unnecessary requests.
So very quickly, one of the fundamental pillars when the design team designed these products is not only to increase performance, but do it in a very efficient manner. They understand the fact that there's never enough resources. So with that being said, what it's doing in that filter driver is providing the operating system a hint on what it should be doing and letting the operating system do its work, kind of do it in a very natural fashion. So we're not going and taking on that duty and doing that work, thereby using your CPU resources. It's just being done by the operating system as a normal course of its operation.
Okay, so perfect straight man into one of your favorite slides.
Let's move on there. So this, as Nick pointed out, is my favorite slide. I like to refer to it as the blender effect. All of the uncoordinated and random I/O traffic from these disassociated virtual machines, all running SQL or perhaps Exchange, doing web hosting, file and print sharing, you name it, all of their I/O traffic is randomly being tossed into this blender of the host, resulting in a chaos of I/O traffic. And this typically overwhelms the host, the hypervisor, your network, and the back-end storage. So as a result, you tend to spend an ever-increasing amount of money for more and more hardware to compensate for this increase in I/O traffic. Now, on the other hand, the image on the right, where we have Velocity optimizing and reducing I/O traffic, you get a much more organized set of traffic patterns or data read and write requests that are satisfied faster and with less hardware, resulting in an overall budget savings that gives you a greater workload capacity.
Okay, so all those people who have been waiting for compatibility, tee it up, man.
Here we go.
Okay. So as Howard talked about, Velocity is a different architectural approach to I/O optimization. And what's key about that architectural approach is we are located at the top of the stack, and that's key to I/O optimization. This location puts our I/O optimization technology as close as possible to the application where the I/O is created. So in a virtual environment, we're installed in each virtual machine, and we are installed inside the operating system for each one of those virtual machines. So with Velocity's architectural approach, we optimize I/O before it leaves the guests. And by doing so, we eliminate all the unnecessary I/O created by the operating system so that the I/O traffic that goes, once it leaves the storage driver, everything below us, the hypervisor, the server, the network storage, can now focus on how to best handle the I/O that it does receive. Now, the beauty about being located inside the operating system, you can think of us as the meat in the sandwich. We have the operating system above us and below us, which makes us agnostic to the application above us and agnostic or independent of the storage below us, which means you don't have to worry about these large compatibility matrix. So Velocity does not change anything related to the I/O. Once that I/O leaves the storage driver, it's like any typical Windows I/O. As we've said before, an I/O is an I/O is an I/O. As a consequence, if that storage device is compatible with Windows, it'll be compatible with Velocity. Now, in terms of the application makes its normal calls to the operating system as it always has. So if the application is compatible with Windows, it'll be compatible with Velocity. So one of the other things about the product that's a nice benefit is that if you happen to have other I/O optimization technologies already inside your environment, such as caching in the hypervisor or the server or the storage layer, we can absolutely improve performance of those technologies as well, because in every one of those cases, they're not removing unnecessary I/O, and they're not increasing the amount of data put inside each particular I/O. So as a consequence, we send productive I/O down to these devices. They can now focus on the productive I/O and not the unnecessary I/O, and you can get a better return on that particular investment. Wouldn't you rather have these investments operating on 100% productive I/O versus wasting 30 to 40% of their time and resource on unnecessary I/O? Is how I would say. I think the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we've said before, the fact is that by having being agnostic to the storage below, we're compatible with any storage that is compatible with Windows. So these vendors that you see here are just examples. We have over 1,200 customers using Velocity today in a wide range of storage systems. So, as we said before, the storage system sees the Windows NTFS I/O as they always have, and it's now also, and as such, it also allows you to be far more compatible with your advanced storage features like snapshot, replication, data deduplication, and thin provisioning, because we eliminate all the unnecessary I/O and allow those features to handle productive I/O, and they can focus on the I/O that they do receive.
So Grant Thompson's been waiting since 9 minutes after 12 to get his question answered.
Okay.
Net it out for him. Which virtualization platforms are supported?
Hyper-V and ESXi.
Okay. And so building on that, so if I just quickly run down, so how would this work in a clustered Hyper-V environment?
In a clustered Hyper-V environment, poses no dangers or concerns for us as long as you're clustered at the host level, such as high availability or DRS. Each virtual machine receives a copy of Velocity, and that's where we live and breathe and provide the performance improvement.
All right. So I'm going to call out Antonio now, because now I want you to go back, because we always get this we get a little mixed up at this point. Sounds sort of like an agent. What is the CPU and memory hit on resources?
Well, first of all, let's clarify and state for the record, it is not an agent. This is a fully vetted out and certified software product solution. It does not use a client agent type of architecture. Each virtual machine has its own distinct, unique copy of Velocity, which is providing the benefit at the virtual guest machine level.
So, Howard, what you're saying is a client agent rides on top of an operating system. We're inside the operating system in a very lightweight fashion.
Correct.
Correct. All right. So, is there an impact or risk to clustered guests?
As far as clustered guests, no. There's no risk whatsoever. The caching that we're doing is a read-only cache, so everything will be fully synchronized and in place.
Okay. This is an interesting question. I don't think I've ever had this one before. So it kind of speaks to our relationship with Microsoft, but how quickly do you respond or keep up with Microsoft patching?
Well, we're deeply embedded with Microsoft, and we continue to have a great relationship there. As far as, because we have that technology set where we've implemented much of our technology within what Microsoft is doing, we're not affected by those patches.
Thank you. That was the question I was looking for, because of where we sit. So, Robert, your analogy, we're the meat in the sandwich.
Correct.
We're taking an I/O out, and we're improving performance. So what happens above us and what happens below us doesn't change our environment. So there's no risk to the app layer above us or the storage layer below us.
Correct.
That's all I wanted. Simple sales guy asking a simple question, right? Okay, so the next one, and then I'm going to keep going. How does the licensing and pricing work?
So licensing works as a price per core model, so that allows you to put as many virtual machines on your system as you'd like. So you just count the number of cores on that server, and the price is based on per core basis.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the technical questions because we're we're literally only got 4 minutes left, and we got a couple more slides to go through. So let's move on and talk about applications that benefit from velocity.
Sure. So any type of application can benefit from velocity VM. However, IO-intensive applications are a sweet spot for the product. So applications like virtual desktop, VDI type of environments, Microsoft Exchange, SQL Server. Now, with that being said, we had a third-party organization called OpenBench Labs do some testing on our product along with some applications. So they did a SQL query test and found that reading and writing 4K and 16K and 32K packets, they're able to demonstrate an average performance gain of 129%. Now, along with that, it not only does Velocity VM provide increased performance for random I/O applications, it also provides increased performance for sequential read and write applications like streaming media. So when OpenBench ran a streaming video set of tests, they were able to demonstrate an average performance of 131% increase.
So we're boasting about some pretty big numbers here.
Yep.
So let's get a little bit more granular, and let's give some examples.
Sure. So OpenBench also got very specific. So they took Velocity VM and they ran it with Exchange. And they simulated 1,800 Outlook users. They ran it on Exchange 2010 with Active Directory and a domain controller. And they found that they could do 60% more transactions in the same amount of time, and that they had an 89% faster response time on Exchange and the domain controller. Now, in addition to that, they were able to increase their IOs per second by 129%. And this was done all with a non-disruptive software approach to their environment. So they loaded in our software, and they started, an hour later, they started to see performance gains with Exchange. Now, for Velocity VM, they also tested it with SQL Server and OpenBench running 80 daemon processes on SQL Server 2010. They found that they could increase transactions by 50% in the same amount of time, while at the same time increasing their response time by 118%. And in addition, Nick, those reports are available on our website, so if you'd like to take a look at them in some more detail, please feel free to download those.
So we really piqued a lot of people's curiosity. So yes, this presentation is going to be available to you, both in a recorded format, and we can make available a PDF format so that you can share it with your colleagues as well. So let's move on. We're going to talk about the benefit analyzer. So whose slide is this one? I forget. Is this my slide? Or is this your slide?
My slide, I think.
Well, you go ahead then.
There you go. So one of the favorite features of the product is a benefit analyzer. So with the benefit analyzer, it's a new feature for us. And what it does is it allows you to do a before and after performance comparison on your system's real-world workloads, allowing you to see what benefits you will receive on your specific systems. It allows you to validate key benefits not only for yourself, but with supervisors and other stakeholders. And that feature also has a best practice guide built in to help ensure that you're running an apples-to-apples comparison test. Now, you might say, how do we know that the results are accurate? So OpenBench also ran tests running iometer in parallel with the benefit analyzer and found that the results to be the same across both tests. In addition, I will just sharing a little bit of personal experience. On a regular basis, we'll get emails from customers who will do the same thing. They might run iometer while they're running benefit analyzer, and they kind of send us a surprise and delight email going, hey, wow, this thing actually reports the same thing as iometer did in terms of performance. So we tried to make sure that it was transparent and that you could trust the results.
So, Robert, you mentioned earlier, based on the OpenBench, at what point should people start seeing performance improvement once they turn the analyzer on?
So, how the analyzer works is that once it's installed, it installs our product as well as the analyzer, and then it monitors your system for 24 hours and gets a performance profile of that system without our software running. Then in the next 24 hours, our software is turned on, and the technology engines for Velocity VM are running, and then on day 3 they measure and tabulate the results, and then you get to see the report. So the beauty of that is once you install it and run your benefit analyzer, the product is now installed running, and you can continue to receive the benefits, as well as get a report. No need to go back out and reinstall the product.
So being the sales guy in the crowd, this is a phenomenal way for folks to do a before and after, and as part of their POC, their proof of concept, to really be able to get some hardcore facts in their own environment. Right?
Absolutely.
All right. So let's flip to the next slide, because this one may catch a few of you off guard. So we've shared with you the architecture. We've shared with you the I/O conundrum. We can share with you, somebody asked, how long has the product been out? We've been shipping this product since December. We have well in excess of 1,200 customers already on the platform. So this is a tried to trusted platform that's out there today. And with the benefit analyzer, Conducive attests that typical customers we've seen in excess of 50% performance gains. Robert had talked about, we had an independent third-party lab, OpenBench, validate Velocity's performance gains. In addition to the benefit analyzer, you can test firsthand what level of benefit you'll receive in a real-world environment and workloads. In fact, we're so confident in our Velocity VM product that we also provide a performance guarantee. When was the last time an enterprise software company provided a performance guarantee? We guarantee a minimum 25% improvement on your VMs, or the software is free. 50% faster performance with no risk. That's how confident we are in the architecture and the platform and the way in which we have taken this technology to market. So for Mike Sullivan, who asked, can you try it before you buy it? You don't really. With the performance guarantee, the guarantee is built in for you with the architecture that we've put forward. And then Mike Sullivan's actually teed this next slide up for me. So do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure, absolutely. So we've been discussing Velocity VM. However, Conducive offers a suite of high-performance software solutions that can increase performance across your entire organization. Software that optimizes I/O for laptops and desktop systems, physical servers, and virtual servers. So the entire line of Conducive high-performance software solutions increase performance without any additional hardware. They're a software-only approach. They are optimizing I/O, increasing throughput and IOPS, reducing latency, and enabling you to get greater application performance in a very non-intrusive way. So starting on the left-hand side, you can see that we have our DiskKeeper Professional system there, or solution, and you can think of that as a Windows system accelerator for laptops and workstations, and that will increase performance on those systems about 25%. Now you can increase performance. The beauty of that solution is you're increasing performance without the need of purchasing a new laptop or workstation. If you move further to the right, we have the Velocity Server product. This is the same family as Velocity VM. Both these products are a different architectural approach than the laptop product, completely different architectural approach. The Velocity Server, you can think of it as a physical server accelerator for high I/O workloads, and it uses the same new architectural approach of Velocity VM, where we're optimizing I/O performance in the operating system. We do not touch the disk. We're not moving blocks around on the disk. All the optimization is taking place inside the operating system so that when it leaves the storage driver, it looks like any old Windows I/O that you would experience. And then on the far right-hand side is what we've been discussing is the Velocity VM, the VM accelerator. And so the way you want to think about these products is if you have a server, a physical server, if you have direct attached storage or network storage, you can absolutely use Velocity Server in those particular environments. Now, if you have your server and it's running as a virtual server or running a VDI application and what's being attached to it is network storage, then you want to think about the Velocity VM product, which is optimized for these virtual servers in that kind of network storage environment.
Go ahead,
So to kind of wrap this up for you, Velocity VM is a non-intrusive software approach that increases application performance by 50% without any additional hardware, no additional energy use, no additional floor space, and no real additional OpEx. You can install it, set it and forget it, and an hour later you're going to see performance improvements in your applications in your virtual machines. It's really that easy. It's a very non-disruptive approach to increase performance, and you can finally realize that promise of your virtualization investment that we spoke about earlier. So with that being said, Nick, that's
Thank you, Robert.
all I got.
So, folks, that ends the formal part of the presentation. We've got a boatload of questions that I'll try to take, and we do appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. We hope that we've been able to pass along some information to you. The folks from our sales organization, of course, will be monitoring. If you would like to have a further discussion on it, we'd really appreciate you reaching out to us, and we'll make available the recording of this presentation. So on behalf of Robert, Howard, myself, and the Conducive team, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day. So, guys, let's get back into some of the questions that I've got, and I'll try to keep these at a high level first, and then we'll get into some of the minutiae. Real quick one, reboot required for installation?
Yes, a reboot will be required.
Okay. So next question is, does the analyzer also show network impact?
The benefit analyzer doesn't really go into looking at network impact, but it's obvious that if we're reducing the number of IOs that Windows has to process and deal with, what's being pushed down further down the IO chain of events is going to be more optimized.
Okay. So your network and host systems must or should support and be configured for jumbo frames?
It's not that that must be configured, but obviously if you want to take advantage of a greater network throughput capability, having those enabled would yield better performance gains.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Dave Denoy asks, how will intense read operations like indexing for search engines be impacted?
Well, I think there would be a very positive impact there in the scope of if you're doing lots of reads and they're repetitive in nature and you have ample amount of memory that we can allocate for our dynamic read cache, that the IOs will be satisfied from cache, which a memory-to-memory IO transfer is many times faster than going all the way out to your storage device.
Okay. So Sal's asking, in a system where block movement is always very large and always sequential, what kind of overhead do these optimizations add?
Well, I think you're looking at the block level type transactions being down at the storage level. And this is not really where Windows is impacting the performance. The negative performance that is occurring in your environment is due to the nature of how Windows perceives the availability of free space and how if an application requests a large chunk of data to be written, that Windows typically will break that request into smaller individual requests.
So what you're saying is there's no impact to those large sequential block movements at the storage layer. The storage system is allowed to use its technology to be as efficient as possible.
Correct.
It's just the I/O that gets delivered to the storage system on the front end. One, it's been I/O reduced. And what we mean by that is we remove the unnecessary I/O, so there's a lot less I/O it has to deal with.
Correct.
And the I/O it does receive is now, we've filled that I/O with as much data as it can take. Think about it as more kilobytes per I/O. So the storage system now can be far more efficient in using its resources because it can focus on the I/O it does receive.
Well put. Exactly right.
That's what I was hoping you guys were going to say. Thank you. All right. So now I got a little bit of a specific question. Grant Thompson's asking, we have some guests that access SANs directly. Will Velocity support optimization of both guest and I/O through the hypervisor and its direct access of a SAN?
Yeah, so long as the I/O request is traveling through Windows, and Windows is seeing that as a local NTFS volume, then Velocity will provide a positive, good impact there.
Okay. I'm not sure. Okay, so this is a similar question to Grant's because I'm trying to get you to answer it a different way. So say Velocity software is running on 2 VMs and a non-VM server without Velocity software is writing to a NAS shared storage device. How does the non-VM server see the storage device? Meaning, does the Velocity software change the storage device?
No, velocity does not change the appearance of the storage device, and the non-VM that's accessing that storage device will see it exactly as the way it's seen it before.
Okay, so kind of back to the whole agnostic solution, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
Right.
Again,
So
I
you
think,
want to remind on that
yeah,
again?
I think it's the thing you have to keep in mind is that if from coming, I understand because coming from a storage background myself, what's different here is that all this optimization is taking place right where that I/O is created, and once you leave that storage driver in the operating system, that there's nothing that has been changed with that I/O. That is a I/O is an I/O is an I/O. It's a Windows I/O. It's coming to the storage system as that storage system has always seen it. There is no negative impact whatsoever on the storage system. In fact, they run more efficiently because they're receiving less I/O because they don't get all that unnecessary I/O. And the I/O they do receive is now fully utilized with data. It's fully packed with data. You can think of it as a very dense piece of I/O, and now it's sent in a sequential manner, and it's given to that storage system, and its intelligence can now take a very efficient set of I/Os and now put them down onto the storage in the most efficient manner they see possible with that technology. So it's nothing but a positive impact for that storage. Now, there may have been, you may hear people say, hey, they may have said things, but they don't understand the fact that this technology is optimizing in the operating system so that once it leaves the storage driver, it is a typical NTFS I/O, and it behaves just as it has always behaved. There is no change to that I/O.
Okay, so stay on that slide, Howard, because now I'm going to take you back to kind of clarify something that I've got two questions that I'm going to give you individually, but they're going to relate to the same topic. So Antonia says, we have Panalogic Broker. Can you improve WAN performance?
Well, the WAN performance improvement is directly related to the fact that we're reducing the number of I/Os hitting the storage device or communicating across your WAN. So as far as improvements there, it's all about the reduction and efficiency of I/O traffic.
So when the WAN technology, when those vendors are their technologies in play, we're sending them, obviously, we've reduced unnecessary I/O, and the I/O that they do receive, now they get to work their magic, their aggregation technologies, their compression, all the other things that they do to those I/Os are now being done on fewer I/Os, and those I/Os are a lot more efficient in the amount of data, so it allows those WAN technologies to be even more efficient in what they do. It's a very complementary type relationship.
So if I can just paraphrase that. So
yes, they get better performance.
Thank you. You can still use your existing
Absolutely.
infrastructure, and we're going to continue to build on performance improvements.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Craig Yamoto is asking kind of similar, so you don't need to go into long explanations, but I want to be specific to his question. When using remote storage, iSCSI or FCIOIP, is there any impact on WAN optimizers?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Right. So when we say 50% improvement with no additional hardware required,
We mean it.
We really mean it.
we're talking about no additional hardware.
We really, really mean it.
We really mean it. Okay. So let me just make sure. I think I got the core. Folks, there's a couple of questions in here that I think are more specific to take offline, and we'll respond back to those. So is there support for SCCM or other mass deployment?
Yes. The installation of the product is a Windows installer package and can be configured to do a silent, uninterrupted type of install, and you can schedule a reboot at your most convenient time frame.
Perfect. And so that answers all of the questions I got here. So again, folks, appreciate you staying on with us for 50 minutes. We're very excited to be able to share this technology with you, share with you examples of how we've been able to improve I/O across multiple environments, and we look forward to having an opportunity to engage with you again in the very near future. Thank you very much.